Okay, I did a bit more work on the front. Again, still really only the big objects. I did do a little bit on the ring here just because it looked kind of silly just being flat. I just wanted it to stand out a bit more. I haven't touched the chains, haven't touched the small details. Strictly just all the bigger elements, trying to understand where shadow's going to fall. And I hit on the front panels because it's the one that's um, in the light. I took our lightest color that we chose here, our near whites, and I popped those on the edges. And then I played with some of the darks in the crevices a bit more, trying to get some shadowing in locations. Down at the front here inside, I darkened it up in here a bit more. So I actually kind of made another color, didn't save it, but I just took our dark color that we've chosen and I pulled it to near black with a 10-20% brush, and I just brushed in some darkening up in here a bit more to darken in the back corners up in there too. And that was back on that bottom layer. What I also did inside there was add a bit of light going in. Again, this is all with a hard brush, 10% on the light color, and I just started brushing in like some lights going in there. And as we move forward, we can determine whether or not we've hit it enough or not enough. Again, I'm not going to go overboard right now. It might be fine the way it is once it comes down to it. So again, zero soft brushes. It's all hard brushes that I'm using at this point if I haven't got that point across yet, right? I'll keep saying it probably, but you know. So now what we're going to do is we're going to concern ourselves with the cast shadow. This is the one that's really going to tell us that we're on the ground. Right now, the box is floating in the middle of nowhere. It's neat. It looks like it's on the ground. The chains are sitting on the ground. The pieces of wood are on the ground. The box is obviously on the ground, but it's really not on the ground until you actually get that cast shadow on the ground. You've no idea whether or not your box is sort of floating or whatnot. So I'm going to go in and make a new layer, and I want to make sure it's completely on the bottom of everything here. There it is. And I'm going to call this cast shadow, and we'll go from there. So we need to sort of determine where that's going to be. Now I'm going to start with probably that color, and I'm going to go to 100% on my brush weight. And I have to think about where the light is now carrying down and hitting. So what angle is it at? If it's hitting it straight on from the front, I'm not going to be getting any shadows off here. I'm going to be getting shadows that come straight off the back, and they're going to be cast off the back of the crate on some angle, depending on which the way the light is. So if the light comes around and is coming more from the front, it's going to come off the back on that angle. But this isn't lit, so we can't do that. So it's got to be in the shadow. So it's either going to be coming off, which as soon as it comes out from an angle of this side, that means actually the shadow is going to be starting over here. It's going to be hitting this angle over here somewhere. So either it's coming straight off and it's hitting the front. And as soon as it starts turning around and going around from the front more, well, this is probably not bright enough because it should be hitting the light. So we got to be really careful. We don't just stick a cast shadow in there that makes no sense with the lighting direction that's happening. So I'm kind of considering the light just a little around from the front. So it's coming off somewhere like that, maybe. And it's going to come off. And now it's going to be quite long because the box is quite high because this is casting a shadow onto the ground on this whole edge. Now, somewhere along that line as well is going to be this thing sticking out. And we could just kind of determine that with a bit of guesswork and do something like that if we wanted. But that's going to end up becoming our cast shadow. Now, somewhere on the other side is the other line, is the other side of this box. The opposite side of this edge is over there somewhere. And so what you can do is you can kind of trace the imaginary line. You've got the line that does this, that's the bottom of the box. And somewhere about there along the same axis is going to be the other side of the shadow. And it's going to come off at the same angle. Then again, I mean, if the light was really close and it was sort of a beamed light, wasn't perfectly straight, I'm thinking more sunlight at this point. So it's a pretty straight shadow. So let's not get too fancy at this point. So I've kind of run out of room to cast it any further. I think it's going to be at least that long, probably with that height of light if it's coming down this angle, and um, and the height of the box. Again, you can look at the top and you can sort of carry a line and say, well, if the light's coming down at that angle and it hits the top of this box, it's going to cast down back here somewhere. So, that's probably pretty good. And we've got that piece of wood that's sticking out there. Now we have to start determine whether or not our shadow is dark enough and makes sense. So shadows tend to fade off over distance. That's because of bounced light. This light is also bouncing around the environment, whatever else is there, and it's bouncing off other objects. So if you look at shadows, put your finger on your desk or whatever, you'll notice it casts a shadow, and it's probably, if it's anything like my office where I've got very diffused bounce lighting, I have no directional lighting in my office at all. It's a very diffused shadow, and it drops off really fast, that shadow. If you go and find a fairly strong light source like the sun, and on August, and it's I don't know, probably 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, and stand on the road, you'll notice you have a longer shadow, or the sun, not in August, let's say it's in January on a bright sunny day, really long shadow just about any time, because the sun's down lower and it's strong, it's fairly straight, and it doesn't drop off right away unless there's stuff to bounce light back onto it. So I'm going to go grab my darker one again, and we'll just darken the shadow up. So I'm going to take it down maybe 30%, take the size up, and I'm going to start brushing in, maybe even lower, 30. And I'm just going to start brushing in that direction. I'm going to hit it with some shadow, some more shadow, and pick it up right at the edges as it starts to, sort of come off the brush. And we can go back and forth with these values if we want. And right where it's hitting the ground, I want it to be pretty dark down behind it. And then it's going to fade off. Another neat trick that you can do with this is actually hit it with your eraser if you want to sort of make it look like it's breaking up. And it's kind of a cool, quick way to do it is you just take it down, maybe even take your eraser opacity down and just break the lines a little bit of it, and it'll kind of break up that shadow as it's going off in the distance. Yeah, feeling like there's something else casting bits of light or reflection across it or whatever else, and it kind of helps it. So that's the cast shadow, and we could probably even go darker on it eventually. I'm not going to go too far at this point with that. I'm going to leave it, I think, and I'm not really that sure about the angle that I've got on the front here. So I'm just going to fix that. That's probably better. So now that's cast, it's starting to sit on the ground, but you can't stop there. You've got to consider all the other shadows. So, all the other bits and pieces of shadow that we need that are cast in areas. So that's probably actually could above and below. So in this cast shadow one, I'm going to consider the the, the chains. I'm going to use, brush. I'm going to use that second one down, grab it. And again, I'm just going to go down to a 30% shadow, fairly big brush, and start painting those in. Maybe not that big. And so they're going to cast shadows onto the ground as well. So they're going to start throwing shadows out, and it's great. I can erase it if I make too much of a mistake because I'm working in a layer again. So it then starts looking like it's sitting on the ground. I'm going to hit this one too and get it to sit on the ground and feel like it's casting a bit of a shadow. Maybe we actually need it darker, so I might use the darker at 10% so I can I can get it a little bit darker as I hit it. This board is going to cast a shadow on the ground here somewhere. So it's going to start casting a shadow, and it's going to cause it to get darker behind it. And same thing with these. It's going to they're going to start getting shadowed, maybe a little bit on the front, depending on their height. And as soon as you do that, you'll notice they suddenly feel like they're actually on the ground. They suddenly feel like they have contact with the environment, and the environment, the ground, even though we're not going to draw ground, suddenly becomes apparent that it's there. Up until this point, you really couldn't tell that there was a ground, and you suddenly do this, and there you go. You suddenly have ground. It all of a sudden starts hitting um, the ground. It's sitting on the ground as soon as you do this. And I kind of like that darker color. I'm going to just use darker value, I guess I should call it. And I'm going to hit it a bit more around those chains. So now that you've got some of those working, and I think I still need it darker, just a little bit darker underneath the edge for some reason. Just doesn't feel like it's dark enough for me. Cool. I think that looks pretty good. So now what we need to do is start considering the shadows that are cast onto the box as well. So especially in the front, we've got this chain that's casting down onto the front of the box. Now we've got a couple layers here. I've got the bars. I don't think they'll be greatly affected, but I could move it up above there. I'm trying to think with this one. Oh, that's just my light example at the top. So I'm going to go to this layer here and throw shadows in because we're under the sketch, so I can throw them in here. So I'm going to put another cast shadow. And then cast shadow all of these and start thinking about things like the chains and other items. This is now casting shadow on here already, but the chains have to cast a shadow. You know, what else is casting shadows onto other objects? This ring should put some dark shadows on here. So I'll go and take care of that and work on that some more and show you the result.